tardes, un verdadero placer saludarles en nombre de la Escuela Nacional de la Judicatura de la República Dominicana y darles la bienvenida al último encuentro de este ciclo de conferencias sobre el futuro de la justicia y del derecho que hemos organizado desde la Escuela Nacional de la Judicatura con la alianza con las escuelas judiciales de España y de Argentina. El día de hoy tenemos el honor de recibir al jurista británico Richard Susskind con la conferencia Jueces, Tribunales, Tecnología y el Futuro. El profesor Susskind, como veremos a continuación, es un referente en el tema de la interrelación entre el derecho, la justicia y la tecnología, una autoridad académica para dialogar sobre el futuro de nuestra profesión y de los sistemas de justicia. A continuación, permítame presentarle en pantalla un breve perfil profesional del profesor Susskind. El profesor Richard Susskind es un autor, orador y asesor de firmas profesionales y de gobiernos nacionales sobre derecho y tecnología. Es especialista del Reino Unido. Ha dado conferencias a nivel internacional y ha sido invitado a hablar en más de 40 países. Ha escrito y editado numerosos libros, incluidos Expert Systems in Law, 1987, The Future of Law, 1996, Transforming the Law, 2000, The Susskind Interviews, Legal Experts in Changing Times, de 2005, El fin de los abogados, Repensando la naturaleza de los servicios jurídicos, Tomorrow's Lawyers, 2013, y ha escrito alrededor de 150 columnas para The Times, y su trabajo ha sido traducido a 10 idiomas. Richard es presidente de la Society for Computers and Law, presidente del Grupo Asesor de Resolución de Disputas en Línea del Consejo de Justicia Civil y presidente del Consejo Asesor del Oxford Internet Institute, donde también es profesor invitado. Debo decir, antes de la pandemia, el profesor Susskind había publicado en diciembre del año 2019 el libro Online Courts y el futuro de la justicia, que de hecho ha sido recientemente traducido al español y puede ser encontrado en línea. Y se convirtió luego de llegada la pandemia en el manual referente sobre el tema del futuro y el uso de la tecnología en el ámbito judicial y en el ámbito del derecho. En la moderación de esta interesante conferencia contaremos y tenemos el honor de tener con nosotros al doctor Antonio García Padilla, quien es decano emérito de la Facultad de Derecho de la Universidad de Puerto Rico, expresidente de esta misma universidad y actual presidente de la Academia Puertorriqueña de Jurisprudencia y Legislación. Debo indicarles que esta conferencia contará con interpretación simultánea al español. Para activarla, solo deberán hacer un clic en Interpretación, debajo en el menú de Zoom, y seleccionar el canal de español. Sus preguntas las estaremos recibiendo a través del espacio de preguntas y respuestas que estará compartiendo el decano García Padilla con nuestro distinguido expositor invitado. Antes de pasarle la palabra, decano, quisiera saludar al profesor Susskind, que probablemente no ha entendido lo que le he compartido. Professor Susskind, on behalf of the National School for the Judiciary of the Dominican Republic and the Dominican Judiciary, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks for your participation as the closing speaker for the Conference of the Future of Law and Justice. It's a great honor to have you here, sharing your knowledge and expertise with our participants of the national and international legal community. We are hopeful that after the current world COVID-19 pandemic is over, you will be able to visit the Dominican Republic, where we will welcome you with open arms. Thank you very much. Ahora le paso la palabra al decano García Padilla para que tenga una breve introducción como moderador de la actividad. Gracias, decano, igualmente por acompañarnos.
Thank you, Dariel. Muchas gracias, Dariel. Richard, it is such a pleasure to share this function with you. Richard, un placer compartir esta actividad con usted. Mr. Susskind will now make his presentation, and we will then, as Dariel has mentioned, we will then take questions. el señor Susskind va a dirigirse a ustedes y acto seguido tomamos preguntas. Richard.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can you just put your thumb up if you can hear me okay? Excellent, thank you. It's a great pleasure, it's an honor to be with you. I visited your country last year, in fact, and had a wonderful holiday when, well, this was before we had the dreadful virus. And so I'm hoping that at some stage I can come back and meet some of you. But meanwhile, we can use technology and share some ideas together about the future of courts. I thought this evening I would ask and answer 6 different questions. Why should we change? What's the matter with our courts as they are just now? Second question is, what mindset should we have? How should we think about the future? Thirdly, what are the technological options open to us? What technologies can we use to change the way we deliver court service? What are the objections to this? What does the future hold? And what should we do now? So why should we change, first of all? Well, sadly, because of the virus around the world, physical hearings have shut, and our current system is not coping. Because the courts are closed, many decisions are not being made. Access to justice is being prejudiced. Secondly, large backlogs are building up. And so once the virus is conquered, we will be left with many more cases to handle. And on top of that, we have the old access to justice problem. According to the OECD, only 46% of human beings live under the protection of the law. Less than half of people in our world have access to lawyers and courts. And in some countries, there are staggering backlogs, 80 million cases in Brazil, 30 million in India. But even in the world's most advanced court systems, if you take civil disputes, in most countries, these take too long, they cost too much, the process is not understandable unless you're a lawyer, and increasingly, court process is out of step in a digital society. With that as our problem, fundamentally an access problem, what mindset should we have in thinking about the future? The question I've been asking since the 1990s is this: is court a service or is it a place? Do we need on all occasions to come together in a physical location to sort our differences? Or might there be, in a digital society, new and better and quicker ways of handling at least our low-value disputes? One thing you need to also think of in terms of mindset is 2 quite different uses of technology. One is automation, the other is transformation. We have had 60 years of automation, essentially using technology to improve or make more efficient our current working practice. But it's time now for transformation, not simply to use technology to improve how we work today, but to use technology fundamentally to change the way we work today. And my favorite case study on this comes from the world of power tools. There's a manufacturer known as Black & Decker, one of the leading manufacturers in the world. And apparently when they recruit new executives, they take them off on a course, sit them down in a room, and show them a slide of a gleaming power drill. And they say to the executives, "This is what we sell, isn't it?" The new executives say, "Of course that's what we sell. We're Black & Decker." The trainers put up another slide, and this slide is a picture of a hole neatly drilled in a piece of wood. And they say, "That's what our customers want. And it's your job to find ever more competitive and creative ways of giving our customers what they want." So I think when we're thinking of the future of lawyers, we should think about the hole in the wall and not just the power tool. We shouldn't assume that tomorrow is an improved, quicker, better, cheaper version of today, we should take a step back and ask what is the fundamental value we bring to those we serve, and ask further how we might use technology to deliver that value in new ways. So what are the technological options open to us in delivering court service in different ways? Well, we've seen them in operation during the COVID crisis. I set up a website with the British government known as Remote Courts Worldwide, www.remotecourts.org. And there we gather news of what's happening around the world in the introduction of remote alternatives to physical hearings. Remote alternatives to physical hearings. There's more than 56 countries reported there. And what you see is that there have been three main types of hearing held remotely: audio hearings, video hearings, and paper hearings. Audio hearings, where you use telephone conference technology to hold a court hearing, not very effective. Video hearing, using the technology we're using this evening to hold a video hearing. Or thirdly, the paper hearing, when there's not actually a hearing at all. It's like when evidence and arguments are submitted in electronic form, there's some online discussion, but like an exchange of emails, not oral evidence, not a physical courtroom, and the judge comes to a decision and delivers that decision in electronic form. The audio hearing, the video hearing, the paper hearing. The main hearing that's been used, the main hearing type, has been the video hearing during the COVID period. It's still quite early days, but early evidence, serious empirical study, suggests that this technology has worked much better than most people expected. Most lawyers and most judges in January of this year would have rejected the idea of a court hearing by video. They would have said that it would not be possible to deliver justice using that technology. But when we had to, lawyers and judges were flexible, were adaptable, and the research suggests that the outcomes are quite satisfactory. Perhaps on many occasions, not as good as a traditional court, but good enough. And good enough is good enough for those many litigants today who have no access to justice. It was mentioned in my introduction that I'd written a book on online courts, and it's called Online Courts and the Future of Justice. And it's not about video hearings. It's more about paper hearings. Let me explain to you what I had in mind. I see a future for low-value disputes of court services with two main characteristics. The first is online judging, and the second is what I call extended court facilities. Online judging is still human judges, but as with the paper hearing, the process is one where the parties don't need to be available at the same time. They communicate as though they're sending emails to one another. There's no physical hearing. There's no oral evidence. It's quick, it's inexpensive, and it's an easy way for people to make their claims, to defend their claims at their convenience, no day of work. And the judge can cope with the cases at his or her convenience. So it's still human judges, but it's judges deciding the cases on papers alone. Won't work for all cases, but there are many cases for which this will be good enough, particularly when otherwise people have no access to justice. The second part of what I call online courts is what I call the extended court. And this is more controversial. I believe that it is not sufficient, if we are serious about access to justice, it's not sufficient simply to have judges making decisions in online courts or in physical courts. That's not enough. If people can't afford lawyers, then the fact that courts are available to them is a rather empty privilege. So I believe it's a role of the state in the future to help people using online tools to help understand their rights, entitlements, and duties, to help them understand the options available to them, to help them organize their evidence, to help them present their arguments. I also believe that we should bring some ADR, alternative dispute resolution, into our court service. We should have mediation, negotiation, not as a private sector alternative, but part of tomorrow's court system. So I want to extend the role of the state to increase access to justice by providing practical help for non-lawyers and providing tools to help them resolve their disputes without going to judges. Now, I realize that this is very radical and new, but it does seem to me this is a way we can genuinely increase access to justice. And we can also divert unsuitable cases away from judges. For litigants, this would be hugely beneficial. A route to resolution where today many have none. For self-represented litigants, it would make them better equipped. And even today, for people who use lawyers, this might be a cheaper and friendlier system. This is not science fiction. I can take you, I think the best place to see this in action is the Civil Resolution Tribunal in British Columbia. But I can also take you to the English system and show you our online court services, or to China, Singapore, Australia, the United States. A famous science fiction writer once said, "The future has arrived. It's just not evenly distributed yet." And so it is with the world of online courts. Just judges without courtrooms, justice without lawyers. These are challenging ideas, I know. And so I know that many people have many objections and concerns. And in my book, 1/4 of that book is devoted to anticipating and responding to the various objections. Here are some of them. People say to me, the service you have in mind is like an economy class service. Surely the first class service is the physical court. That will be still only available to the rich. The poor people will have access to economy online courts. But I say, if a service is quicker, cheaper, more efficient and convenient, that sounds to me like the first class service. People say, but the service is not transparent. There's no open justice. The experience of COVID is that these video hearings are more transparent. People are more able from around the world to attend physical hearings or online hearings. People may say it's not a fair trial because it's not public. But our concept of public is changing. In fact, when we say today, let us make something public, we often mean exactly that it should be on the internet. If you look at our children, for them, the conception of public is not a physical public space. It's a readily accessible online space. What about digital exclusion? Well, I don't know within your own country, but actually in most countries, the level of mobile phone use, of internet access is quite high. And also we need as the state to provide help to those who don't have digital access. However, I do accept that these kinds of public sector technology projects are often very, very hard to execute. And one of my projects is to think for developing economies, how we can put together a toolkit so that different countries aren't inventing these systems from the ground up. One of the problems here is that critics of online courts, often lawyers and judges, look at this idea through legal and judicial spectacles. They cannot help but think that this system is not what they're used to. The challenge is to think of the court system not designed by lawyers for lawyers, but as a system designed for non-lawyers, for regularly court users. And what worries me is that often, in the name of justice, online courts are criticized, and this is meaning we might miss the opportunity to reduce injustice. And there are many concepts of justice that are discussed. So I have identified 7, but just to give you an example, some people will say, as I said, that the problem with online courts is that they are no longer as public as traditional courts. And that might be a problem of procedural justice or of open justice. But I say there's another form of justice, and that's distributive justice. And that means that public goods should be widely available in society. Today, in many countries, our judicial system is very high quality, but available only to a few. A Rolls-Royce service for a few, and everyone else is walking. Distributive justice may be, on some occasions, as important as open justice. But what does the future hold? There is a second generation. It's many years away, but I think you'll want me to answer this question. So I wrote my PhD at Oxford University in the 1980s on artificial intelligence and law. And so the question people often ask me is, can a computer replace a judge? And the short answer to that is no. Our computer systems today, although very advanced, cannot replicate or copy the complex reasoning processes of judges. But does that mean that computers will have no role in the resolution of disputes in the future? I want to raise another possibility with you. I'm not recommending it. I just want to put it forward as a thought experiment, as an idea. There is a new kind of technology which involves systems that can predict the outcome of court disputes. A system that can more accurately predict judicial behavior than any human lawyer. So imagine, let's go back to Brazil, where there are 80 million cases in the backlog, most of which will never be sorted out in a physical courtroom with human judges and human lawyers. Here's another possibility. Imagine you said to parties, in your dispute area, we have a system that has all the past decisions that governs your area of law. Would you accept a decision of this system, which is a prediction? This system can predict the likely outcome in your case. Would you accept that prediction as a binding determination if the level of confidence of the system is perhaps 97%? So that's the idea of a prediction as a determination. Again, not to replace judges, but perhaps to be used where judges cannot be used. And I'm not recommending that, but I'm giving you an idea of how machine learning, how artificial intelligence might be used in the law. This does raise some basic questions of machine learning, as you'll probably know, that these systems cannot explain the predictions they make. As judges, you make decisions and provide reasons. These systems provide predictions without reasons. They are like a black box, and that is a problem. A second issue is bias. A lot of the data upon which these past decisions might be based may be biased data. And people worry that these prediction systems might perpetuate, might carry on past biases. Well, these are huge research issues in the world of machine learning. They won't be solved over the next couple of years, but nor will these systems be ready for a couple of years. I've been taking you into the future. But what should we do now? What should you do now? Just to remind ourselves, we're in the middle of a massive, unscheduled pilot, experiment, consultation exercise in the use of one kind of technology, the video hearing, in courts. We need to assess what's gone well, and I think industrialize that. And we need to recognize what hasn't. In a way, this allows our policy making to be evidence-based. And what I suggest to you is that you plan in 3 phases. In the short term, if you're using remote hearings, you need to stabilize them, improve them, these temporary systems, so that you can use them reliably until the vaccine comes in place. Secondly, in the medium term, as I said, you need to industrialize those categories of systems that have worked well for you. But thirdly, I think around the world, we need radically to rethink our court systems, our traditional court systems. We need to think about using the power of technology to allow us to increase access to justice. I close with a story. A couple of years ago, I was invited to give a talk to 2,000 neurosurgeons, brain surgeons in the United States. And they asked me to be controversial. And I started my talk by saying, patients don't want neurosurgeons. I said, patients want health. And I said to them, I know you've asked the question for me to answer, what is the future of neurosurgery? But you think I'm going to talk about robotic surgery. But surely the future of healthcare is non-invasive healthcare. The future of healthcare will be no surgery at all. I said, you're asking the wrong question. If you ask what's the future of surgery, you should be asking instead, how in the future will we be solving problems to which neurosurgery today is our best answer? And so when I'm asked the question, what is the future of courts? I say, that's the wrong question. We should be asking, how in the future will we be solving the problems to which courts are currently our best answer? Because here's the truth. Just as people don't want neurosurgeons, people want health. People don't want courts. They want the outcomes that you, as people who work in courts, as you as judges, deliver. And if we can deliver these outcomes in cheaper, quicker, better, more convenient ways, then we will, I believe, increase access to justice. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a privilege to present to you. Thank you for listening. And I'm more than happy now to answer some questions.
Thank you, Richard. Very provocative. And before we start getting questions from the group, let me ask some of mine. You have cited often in your writings, I think, many failed experiences regarding the incorporation of technology to the judicial process. Failure experiments in trying to build better holes in the wall without the drill. Can you maybe expand as to the rhythm and pace in which systems should consider moving, particularly maybe in light of this recent COVID pandemic?
I think there's 2 kinds of failure. There's healthy failure and unhealthy failure. Unhealthy failure is often due to lack of leadership. It's often due to resistance by lawyers. It's often due to poorly managed technology projects. It's often due to an inability to communicate with users to find out what they really want. That's unhealthy. For justice systems that are trying to be pioneers, in a sense like England and Wales, who want to be at the leading edge, there is healthy failure. It's like in the sciences, it's like in medical sciences, where we have to have a research and development mentality. We have to have an experimental mindset. We have to try out ideas and be bold, accepting that some of them won't work. So the question, therefore, this raises for you is whether or not you choose to be a pioneer, but therefore will suffer perhaps from healthy failures. But they're not always easy to stomach, and lawyers don't like failures, or whether or not what you choose to do is perhaps be a fast second. That's to say, wait for other people to fail, learn from their experience, and capitalize on that. And if you regard yourself as one of, say, 50 similar countries who have similar jurisdictions with similar challenges, perhaps you wait for them to make the errors, to learn from their experience. And meanwhile, make sure you've got the leadership, you've got the political support, you've got the financial backing, you have the help and willingness of lawyers, you manage the projects well, you consult extensively with users.
Very good, very good. Richard, one of, in my view, most provocative sections of your book from last year deals with the psychology of human interactions in the justice system, how technology, in a way, may lead us to overlook that component of adjudication. Talking, when you started talking about neurosurgeons, that came to my mind. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about that issue, the psychology of human interactions, and how do they factor in the adjudications?
Well, there's many things I could raise. Let me raise two. That what we have in our current court system is a well-established, well-understood process of interaction between human beings. We understand the rhythm, we understand the participants, the rules are clear. And when it comes, for example, to judges assessing credibility or to listening to cross-examination, you can bring with you past wisdom of seeing such court process in action, past experience and understanding of the psychology of the traditional court process. When you change these processes, as we've seen with online hearings, virtual hearings, as we see with online courts, it'll be a whole new set of skills, a whole new psychological context. Now, most lawyers are quite conservative and are likely to resist that change and point out all the problems and shortcomings. But I think if we're serious about access to justice, we need as lawyers and judges to be more curious. We need to be excited about the possibility of developing new techniques to resolve all kinds of problems. And so while I agree that the current process is well understood as some form of psychological engagement, I think it's time also to look at other interactions between human beings. Let me make another point, though, about psychology. And that is this, that many people, when I talk about artificial intelligence and say that systems are unable to offer explanations of their lines of reasoning, people say that's hopeless. But I go back to the work of the American legal realists, the legal philosophers about 100 years ago, who were skeptics, who said very often that what judges gave as their reasons were actually rationalizations. There was a theory known as the judicial hunch, that at the beginning of a case, and I cannot tell you that this is what all of you do, but we're all only human. And if you read any books about psychology and decision-making, we often come to very early decisions and we have a confirmation bias that we want to build a whole set of factual and legal premises that will justify that conclusion. And the American legal realists said, and there was a body known as, or a school of thought known as digestive jurisprudence, that a decision made by a judge is to some extent determined by what he or she had for breakfast. I say that as a joke, but it is true that as human beings, the ostensible reasons we give for our decisions are not a description of our neuropsychological processes. And so I can imagine developing systems that offer structured, defendable reasons for the decisions, even though they did not underlie the process that led to their conclusions. And as I say, as a matter of psychology, that might not be very different from what human judges do.
Very good, very good. Richard, the first question that I get points to the fact that we value confrontation in legal education, in legal processes a lot. And I take that you have in your analysis, you have paid particular attention to civil justice, and in a way make distinctions regarding criminal cases. And now that the question comes out of the way we value a confrontation and how would it fit in a more technology-based decision-making processes. Could you maybe address that?
Yes, my book, I expressly say that much of my thinking does not apply to criminal cases. I think criminal cases throw up some interesting, and I think unique in the legal system, social questions. I think many people believe in their guts, they believe emotionally that serious crime should be heard in a physical court. And I think many of us may think that for many years yet, that even if there is a more efficient way of holding a criminal hearing, we should still assemble in a physical courtroom. I don't attack that. And so I do think there is a difference between developing online processes to handle fairly low value civil claims to increase access to justice. I find that very different from how we might handle serious crime. And if you have juries, how we would conduct that. I'm in opposition to the idea of, for example, of a virtual jury. But you raise a different point, and I don't know enough about your jurisdiction. I should say I'm a Scots lawyer by background, and Scots lawyers are half common law and half civil law, so I can be either. But my feeling is, and it's a personal feeling, it certainly doesn't represent the judges, but I think our system has become too adversarial. I think particularly many of our civil disputes, once lawyers are involved, the process escalates. I'm more interested in dispute containment than dispute resolution. And it's hard. I'm all more interested in dispute avoidance than dispute resolution. But it's hard to contain disputes in an adversarial context. And so when we talk of proportionality in civil cases, I think we need to make sure that the proportionality refers not just to the time and the cost, but the degree to which the dispute is conducted in a combative, confrontational, unhelpfully so way. As for criminal, again, in the common law tradition, it's an adversarial process. In the civil law system, it's more inquisitorial. And I think it's true to say, and this is a criticism that people level at online courts, that online courts encourage a more inquisitorial approach. And that, for many English lawyers, is the end of the subject, because we're an adversarial system. Whereas I say, well, if this more inquisitorial approach is increasing access to justice, or in criminal cases is a more effective way of achieving the outcomes we want, why not revisit the habits of 150 years, or maybe even 900 years in England and Wales? Why not be open to a technology-enabled, less adversarial process. And so this is consistent with my thinking more generally. If you think, how do we drop an adversarial system into Zoom? I'm not sure I can help you. But if you think, if we use new environments to help us conduct disputes, perhaps we should be changing the way we conduct our dispute resolution. Now, I know for many lawyers and judges, this is offensive because the adversarial system is close to the heart of so many. But I go back to the challenges we face. More than half of humanity are excluded from the court system. In most jurisdictions, to pursue an action costs too much, takes too long. The process isn't understandable unless you're a lawyer, and is increasingly out of step in a digital society. If our systems were working well and access to justice was genuinely available, I would be finding it hard to complain. Let me make a contrast with law firms. When I advise the most successful law firms in the world, I say to them, it's hard to convince a room full of millionaires that they've got their business model wrong, because their business model is not wrong from their point of view. But I can't say it's hard to convince a room full of judges you've got your business model wrong, because actually it's not delivering. That doesn't mean judges aren't great people. It doesn't mean that our great traditions should be abandoned, but it does mean we should open our minds to new ways of working.
Good. Richard, somebody asks about your views on the creation of research and innovation centers to prototype and explore, it says, new types of courts and legal services to citizens. What about these research labs?
Forgive me. Yes, I think that's a great idea. And in a way, in a very, very early way, that's what remote courts worldwide is. This is one of my ambitions, is to start a global program to develop a standard platform that can be tailored for individual jurisdictions, that allows particularly developing economies to put in place quite rapidly the basic infrastructure. And so I think we do need, I think it's a global and communal exercise, research and development in the development of that standard shared infrastructure. There's also a point I want to make about law schools. It worries me that law schools around the world are not that interested. There are, of course, honorable exceptions, but most law professors don't consider the future of legal and court services to be an object of serious study. Whereas I think we need empirical research on the impact, it's a form of socio-legal study or sociological research, on the impact of these new technologies. And we also need precisely what your questioner suggested. We want some of our finest minds to be working on legal laboratories to develop new and improved techniques. Some of it may be specific to individual jurisdictions. There may be international competition, but I don't think it should be any different from the medical labs around the world. And just as the medical community has come together and to a large extent shared insight in trying to tackle COVID, then I think in trying to tackle the access to justice problem, which afflicts more than half of humanity, we should be collaborating and coming together.
Would you say that, following up on your answer, would you say that we should start by exposing future lawyers at law schools to these technological platforms or digital platforms for interactions, starting with teaching and learning and researching?
Absolutely. I think in most law schools, what we teach and how we teach hasn't changed since I was in law school in the late 70s and the early 80s. And the question there are exceptions. The question we need to ask is, what are we training young lawyers to become? And I believe in law schools, we're educating them to become 20th century lawyers rather than 21st century lawyers. It amazes me when I give talks to young lawyers discussing the kinds of things I've been discussing tonight. They look pale, they look frightened, they had no idea. Most lawyers, certainly in England and Wales and in America are thinking that the law is John Grisham. They're thinking the law is Rumpole of the Bailey. They're thinking the law is what they've seen in their television, or they've heard from their uncle or father or aunt who's a lawyer. But what we're talking about here is such a fundamental change that we owe it to law students to prepare them for it.
Are there any particular concerns regarding developing countries? I mean, you have already addressed this in a way, but any particular thinking about the issues faced by developing countries?
It's always interesting for me because I get visitors from all over the world who come to London to hear what we're doing in our judicial system. And they come to the Royal Courts of Justice, this beautiful Gothic building, and they see judges in robes and wigs, and they see handwritten documents, and it somehow fulfills the romantic vision. And many people in developing countries say, we want to develop a system that looks like yours. And I say, we're actually trying to replace this system. This system we regard as antiquated. We regard this system as out of place and out of date. And so I say to the opportunity is for you to leapfrog. We're held back by our legacy. We're constrained by our current ways. I often say, you can't change the wheel on a moving car. And that's our problem. So for us, with 50 or 60 million people within our single jurisdiction, the practicalities of executing rapid change are so formidable. But for many developing countries, smaller jurisdictions, the opportunity to leapfrog, I think, is very attractive. And you should be more nimble. You should be more agile. You should be more able to institute and bring about change. For many years, I advised the government of Jersey. You'll know the island of Jersey, a small independent jurisdiction with close relationships both to England and to France. But I was amazed at how quickly we could bring about change. We codified and then made available electronically the entire body of law in about 2 or 3 years. We could get around the table, as you can in your country, all the key players in a way, in a couple of hours, in a way it would take months to assemble all the major decision makers in England and Wales. So I'm hoping you're nimble and agile. But also I think if I am successful in what I hope to do over the next few years, I think for developing countries, we have to make available this standard infrastructure and platform that draws on the experience of those jurisdictions that have successfully used these technologies.
Very good. Richard, we're approaching the end of our time for this conference. But before I pass it back to Dariel, let me conclude with a question on a more personal note. I see that you have started to publish with your son, Daniel. And tell me, how is the generational difference felt by you, or maybe felt by him? Have you ever felt that he considers you talking about from the past, not only about the past, but from the past? Or could he be even more conservative, maybe, as it sometimes happens?
Well, Daniel's an economist. He teaches at Oxford University, and we wrote a book together called The Future of the Professions, and it was published by Oxford University Press. And it's probably been the great privilege of my life to write a book with my son. I would say to you, it was not always easy. It's quite hard combining family with work. One of the reasons I wanted to work with him is precisely as someone I'm 60 next year. No matter how much you try to keep in touch with emerging technologies, the mindset of the generation of people who cannot remember a pre-internet world is very different. So I wanted exactly to work with someone who did have a different mindset. And what we agreed at the outset is that we would agree on every point that we make in the book. There's nothing in that book we disagree with. We hammered out absolutely everything. And in some ways, he can be more, in a way, he's more conservative than I am because he's an economist. And so when he does a list, he wants everything to be, say, mutually exclusive and jointly exhaustive. I don't care about that kind of thing. So he's more precise. He's more hardworking than me as well. He used to phone up my wife to complain that I wasn't working hard enough, which is a great reversal of roles, but a great privilege and a great pleasure. And I hope people get the opportunity to read that book at some stage. I think it's translated into your language.
Thank you so much. Very engaging the conversation, and a pleasure conversing with you, and look forward to maintaining this conversation at the Dominican Republic at some point in time. Thank you again. Dariel.
Muchas gracias, señor decano. Muchas gracias a todos en nombre de la Escuela Nacional de la Judicatura y el Poder Judicial de la República Dominicana. Reiteramos las gracias al profesor Richard Susskind y al decano García Padilla por tan interesante diálogo sobre el futuro de nuestra profesión y sobre los retos de la justicia en el mundo. Agradecemos a todas las personas que cada día nos acompañaron en este ciclo de conferencias que hoy concluye, asimismo a las escuelas judiciales de España y Argentina, en las personas de sus directores, Jorge Jiménez y Sergio Palacio, por su contribución con las experiencias de sus países y ayudarnos a coorganizar este importante ciclo. Para el 2021 esperamos seguir reflexionando sobre este tan importante e interesante tema para el Poder Judicial Dominicano y la justicia en el mundo. Sin dudas, con esta conferencia cerramos por todo lo alto este ciclo de conferencias y esperamos que nos acompañen en los próximos eventos. Professor Susskind, you said that we have to open our minds. And I think after listening to you, we've done it. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.